Welcome to Smashterpieces, a casual walk through the history of the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate roster. My name is Joe.
And my name is Matt.
And if you're new here, what we are doing on the show is we are playing one game for every character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate from 1984's Duck Hunt to 2019's Fire Emblem Three Houses. And today's episode is covering one of the most revolutionary and influential games that has ever been made. It is representing fighter number 16, Sheik. It is the 1998 Nintendo 64 game, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. And of course, we are not alone. If you listened to the last episode in our pre-show, you know that we are recording with a guest today, so please welcome to the show, Soul. Hi, Soul.
Hello.
Soul is the designer of the Smashterpieces logo and a good friend of Matt and I, so welcome to the show.
Finally, you got a real fucking gamer on your show.
Hey, it only took, 28 episodes?
Around that. This is 26.
So yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I think the actual number, the exact number, is somewhere around 30-something?
Well, we had an episode 0, and then we had Banjo-Kazooie. So I'm exactly correct.
You know, Final Fantasy went for 5 episodes.
No, those are multi-part episodes. I'm exactly correct.
Earthbound went for 4 episodes, and we also put out an April Fool's episode, and...
That's not canon.
Anyways, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is a big deal. It's kind of a big game. It's a game that a lot of people really like.
You might have heard of it.
Maybe, just a couple of times. It is, of course, the first time that the Legend of Zelda series jumped into 3D. It is up there as influential alongside stuff like Mario 64, which revolutionized 3D platformers. This one did that, but for 3D action-adventure games. We've been told that we should probably, explain some of the game, even if it's like... My brain is like, everybody listening to this knows what Ocarina of Time is, but not necessarily the case. So let's go over that real quick. Remember Link to the Past? Now move the camera behind you, and you got Ocarina of Time.
Pretty much, and we kind of touched on that when we were talking about Link to the Past, where it's like, boy, I didn't play Link to the Past when I was a kid, but now that I have, Ocarina of Time is just the slightest bit less impressive.
Ocarina of Time is just Link to the Past, but in 3D, and also, I think, kind of better, personally.
Yes, I would agree with that, but it also has the benefit of being a sequel.
That is true. Well, but it also, at the same time, has the handicap of, it moved into 3D. Still, even at that point, even though Mario 64 had come out 2 years prior to it, that was rocky terrain to go over, if that makes sense.
There's also the additional complication of how it was originally supposed to be for the 64DD.
Well, you could say that about most 64 games, to be honest.
Yes.
We're gonna get into that for almost every game for the 64 that we are playing. As a history lesson, for Soul and for people listening, because Soul, I assume you don't know what the hell we're talking about when we say 64DD.
I know very little about it.
So, the N64DD was a disc-based add-on to the N64 that was released in Japan.
And in case you're wondering, the DD does not stand for disk drive. It stands for dynamic drive.
Yeah. And so it was something that you attached to your 64, and it gave it the ability to use a mouse and stuff like that for stuff like Mario Artist, or it would allow for an ability to put more stuff in your game, basically. And so a lot of games started as a product for the 64DD, but here's the issue. The N64DD was a terrible financial flop.
It sold 15,000 units.
In Japan.
Yeah, they didn't bother releasing it anywhere else.
It was a huge, huge financial flop, and so Nintendo gave up on it pretty quick, and all of the games that were being developed for the DD were then moved, either canceled, like Earthbound 64, or like a bunch of other classic N64 games were moved onto the regular N64, which in a lot of cases meant they had to pare it down.
In the case of Ocarina of Time, though, it wasn't because the DD was a failure already, because the DD actually didn't get released until 1999, and Ocarina of Time was in, of course, 1998. So I don't have actual information in front of me, but I am going to assume that the reason for that is because of how because just release dates. Ocarina of Time was ready before the DD was ready, and then they had to put it together and they had to release the game.
That does not mean, however, that Ocarina of Time was not affected by the DD's failure, because what we now know as Master Quest is largely theorized. I don't think this was ever confirmed. Largely theorized was supposed to be a remix specifically for the DD. It was basically gonna be DLC, quote unquote, for Ocarina of Time. And I believe that's also what Majora's Mask splintered off into as well.
It is sort of. Ura Zelda is kind of complicated. In the year 2000, Miyamoto actually said that Ura Zelda was finished, period. But I don't totally think that Master Quest was Ura Zelda. I think Master Quest was made from parts of what Ura Zelda was going to be, because I just sort of don't believe that it was finished. But Master Quest was released as part of a pre-order bonus for the Wind Waker. Mm-hmm. It was a 2-disc release of Ocarina of Time for GameCube. And for 10 years, this was the only way to play Master Quest until the release of Ocarina of Time 3D.
Yeah. So we have talked a lot about some of the history of leading up to Ocarina of Time, but I do want to hear a personal history, because you two have pretty good personal histories with the game. I don't, so mine can be quick. I'll go first. I played it back in 2011, 2012. I think it was 2011. And I played the original N64 version, and then this time playing it for this show was actually my second time playing it ever.
I was so young when I played it that I have no memory of the first actual time that I did play it. I know that for an assignment in kindergarten about what we did that weekend, I wrote about playing Ocarina of Time, and my teacher got mad because it was video games. And actually wrote a note home to my parents that I needed to talk about something else.
Oh my goodness.
And the Redeads in Hyrule Market as an adult are my first memory of being actually scared of something in a video game, which now I know they're not scary at all because they basically do nothing but be annoying and slow you down. But as a kid, that was seriously the scariest thing in the world.
My first experience with the game was, I want to say it was around 2013. It's actually the first, I say, real video game that I've ever played. I was never one to grow up with video games as a kid, but around that time I started to become friends with a lot of people who were very into games, and they had suggested that maybe I would like the Zelda series. So on a complete whim, I spent hundreds of dollars on a 3DS and Ocarina of Time and played it, and thankfully I loved it, but that would have been quite a time if I had disliked it. But then after that, pretty much at least once a year I would do a Legend of Zelda playthrough of Ocarina of Time. So it's a tried and true favorite that I can go back to and still find new joy in.
And you're kind of at the point now where you are more used to Master Quest than the original version, right?
Yes, because I had bought a used copy of the 3D cartridge, and whenever I buy used games, if there's an old save file on it, I don't delete it. It's a weird quirk of mine. So I only had 2 other save slots for regular, and then there were 3 for Master Quest, and I would keep playing over and saving over the Master Quest ones, but I just got more familiar with it. I like how the puzzles are a little bit better in Master Quest. I feel like they kind of use more of the gameplay mechanics at the same time for any given thing. So I mostly play Master Quest when I pick it up.
Basically, we covered this last episode, but you've got the full spectrum of Ocarina of Time fans here. You've got me, who was playing it essentially I might as well have been playing it for the first time. Let's be real. It had been almost a decade since last time I touched the game, and I might as well have been playing it for the first time. You got Soul, who has played it a bunch, but isn't like, by your own admission, you're not like a speed runner. You don't know the strats. You haven't memorized dungeons. You've played it a lot. You like the game. And then you got Matt, who I can't go 10 seconds at a stream without him shouting, "Man, power crouch stab is great. Have you ever figured out how to glitch through this part? You can skip this whole
Well, I was trying to like give you like actual advice on what to do, and also like I kept saying power crouch stab over and over and over again to try to get you to do it because it's super easy and you weren't doing it.
How do you know I wasn't doing it?
I was watching your stream when we were doing the randomizer.
Oh, well, yeah, but also I'm lazy. I was gonna say, you don't know I wasn't doing it in my game because you couldn't see it because I didn't stream it.
3DS got rid of power crouch stab.
Yep, so we have since found out.
All I'm saying is that if you want to learn some strats, you can watch my playthrough.
Yeah, your playthrough is actually on the channel already, fully, all the VODs. So
sick.
That's cool, and if you want to check that out, you can definitely check that out on our YouTube channel. I did not stream this time because I was playing 3DS, and so did not have the ability to stream. But don't worry, because I'm not going to play 3D when we get to Majora. I'm going to play regular-ass Majora. So you'll get to see me bumble through an N64 Zelda then. So, let's talk about the game itself. Because, as we have said like 3 times at this point, this game is very influential, and it's one of the first games of its kind, or like Mario 64. It is not the first game like it, but it is the first good and successful game like it, which means it essentially might as well be the first game like it.
I don't know if I want to confidently say it was the first good one, because I don't know for certain that there wasn't one that came earlier, but it was by far the most successful.
I'm pretty sure I can say very certain that it was the first mainstream, successful, and probably good one out of that. There might have been a good 3D action-adventure game before that, but considering the state of 3D games at the time, I don't think that's too much of a stretch to assume that probably wasn't the case. One of the things that really stuck out to me, I think, is that I feel like the mission statement for this game, more than anything else, even more than Mario 64 at any point, was, if we do something, it is going to be something that we couldn't do in 2D. Almost everything you can do in this game is stuff that would be impossible in 2D, especially stuff in the dungeons. The dungeons feel explicitly designed as like, we wouldn't be able to do this in 2D, and now we're going to show off how far this new technology can go. Like, the water temple would be fucking impossible in Link to the Past.
I mean, one of the very first things you do in the game, in the Deku Tree, is you jump from the top of the Deku Tree to the bottom of the Deku Tree.
Yeah, like, that would be impossible in Link to the Past, in the way that it currently exists. Or, like, stuff in the Fire Temple where you push that block onto the steam thing and make an elevator out of it. Couldn't do that in 2D. It wouldn't work. Stuff like the Lens of Truth could not fucking work in 2D in any way without the camera being where it is.
The hookshot's also a really good example of it for me, because there was a hookshot in Link to the Past, but this one just feels so much more dynamic because you're using it more for vertical motion than horizontal motion. Whereas, obviously, in Link to the Past, the hookshot was exclusively horizontal motion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the Water Temple still kind of has its issues, even in 3D, with the iron boots fixed. Because, Soul, have you experienced the 64's Water Temple?
No.
The only reason that it's really and I feel like I've gotten this both from experience and from having it explained to me a couple of times by people like Matt who know the game inside and out. The main issue with it is that putting on your boots you can't map that to a button.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to pause, put on your boots, go to the bottom, go to where you need to go, pause, take off your boots, float to the top. And it just makes it a kind of a slog to get through.
And something that I've noticed in the 3DS version where you can map the boots to a button is that, like, if you go underwater, you can, like, cycle the boots on and off kind of quickly as the timer starts if you don't have the Zora tunic. And the game is not programmed to assume that you're going to be doing that, because why would you? It would take forever to do that with the slow-ass pause screen on the N64 version. And like you can sort of artificially extend the timer because it resets every time it reappears.
Nice. And so from then, I think the water temple, the main issue with it is the method of changing the water levels. Because changing the water levels itself, again, is a really interesting mechanic, especially in the context of we are doing something that is only possible in the type of game that we are making at this point. I think that attaching it to specific locations instead of like future games, if I remember correctly, will just give you like a song or something that lets you do it. All it does is add an extra step to trying to get somewhere, because let's say you gotta get somewhere on the second, especially if it's on the second thing. Now you have to go fucking lower it all the way to the bottom, and then you gotta lower it to the middle, and damn it, now I gotta get to the third layer, so I gotta go find the place that raises it to the top, and it just adds an extra step to what is already something you're doing, and it's never really a super cool idea to add another step to something like that.
The thing about the water temple for me is that if you take away the specific locations and make it so that you can do it freely, then the first half of the dungeon, which is kind of a puzzle in itself to figure out how to get back up to the top, loses something. I think that figuring out, like, making your way to the original default state again is a part of the puzzle of that dungeon for me. And if you can't do that, or rather, if you make it so that is effectively not an issue, because it's a step-by-step process of figuring out how to get the dungeon into the specific configurations that you need. And I feel like you would lose a lot for not having that.
Well, I think here's a compromise then. What if, as you went, once you got back up to the top, you were able to unlock some form of shortcut back to the raising and lowering locations?
So you want to kind of be upset?
Sure.
There is one.
Awesome.
It's the Scarecrow's song.
Oh my god.
There is a Scarecrow location right next to the highest Zelda's Lullaby point that you can hook shot to.
Of course there is.
Because I believe that the developers thought the Scarecrow song was going to be less of an arcane bullshit thing than it was. And the Scarecrow song, for those of you who may not know, because I know many people who literally don't know what that is who have played the game. In Lake Hylia, one of the Scarecrows there, you can teach a song to him. And then when you become an adult, there are places throughout the world that you can play that song and he will appear for you to hookshot to him. The problem being that literally no one knows about this. You don't need it to get through the game unless you are going for 100% completion.
I understand why people get frustrated with it, even on 3DS with the boots button, because if you're really thorough with your exploration of all the corners and weird, like, tunnels in that dungeon, and you explore beyond whatever floor the water level's currently at, you don't really need to raise and lower the water that much, but a lot of people will miss certain areas and corners and stuff because it is a very kind of geometric shaped type dungeon. So I find when I talk to people, a lot of people are like, oh man, I have to like cycle back all the time and raise it and lower it, and it's a big thing. So I can see that being frustrating for people and getting tired, because like it's a cool gimmick at start, but if you're doing it a lot, then it loses some of its magic.
If you're thorough about exploring everything that's accessible at any given time, you can do the entire dungeon, only hitting each configuration twice.
Mm-hmm.
So you lower it down to the first level, bring it up to the second, bring it up to the third, bring it back down to the first, bring it back up to the second, bring it back up to the third, and then you're done.
Yeah.
The problem comes in when people miss something in the dungeon.
Yeah, because there's a lot of areas, too, I find that look very similar. Like, just kind of transition hallways from one big room to another look very similar, so it's easy to go through one and be like, oh, I've already gone through here. And you miss, like, a bombable wall or, like, something that's changed with the water. So it can be a lengthy temple if you're not sure what you're doing.
All right, so Soul, now I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What is your favorite dungeon?
My favorite dungeon is the Shadow Temple, and I get a lot of flack for it because it is, I will admit, a very straightforward, linear dungeon where you don't really need to backtrack that much, and once you, like, use the Lens of Truth, oh, that's where I need to go. But I really like the aesthetic and mood of it, and I do like what the puzzles do with the Lens of Truth.
I could see that. I don't remember a lot about I hate the dead hand, obviously, but I don't know anybody that likes the dead hand.
The dead hand's awful. You have to, like, destroy your controller to mash fast enough to get away from it.
Yeah, that boss kind of sucks. I like the boat in the Shadow Temple a lot. There's not much to it, but aesthetically I really like it. I don't know why it's there, but I really like it.
It's a River Styx metaphor, I guess.
I guess that makes sense, I suppose. But, like, I like to imagine somebody in ancient times was like, hey, we're building this temple. What should we put in this, like, 60-foot canal that we have made? What if we put a boat? Like a big boat? Where would it go? To the end of the canal.
You need it to get from one side of the temple to the other.
And then it sinks. I don't see the problem. I definitely like the lore behind the Shadow Temple the most. Because I feel like it's the only one that has an actual lore behind it. Because most of the others, and I guess the Spirit Temple kind of does too.
So I, who am at the point where I skip most of the dialogue now, and have not genuinely read the dialogue in maybe a decade, do not remember the lore. Perhaps you can enlighten me.
I'm pretty damn sure that the lore behind the Shadow Temple is it's where prisoners of the Hyrule royal family were sent to die.
I'm checking the wiki right now, and that does seem to be the case. It's also like it's a Black Ops site. Like, the royal family never talks about it.
I wouldn't either. I feel like most royal families have something like that where they don't want to talk about it. But, like, that's why everything is covered in fucking skeletons and it's all dirty and gross and there's ghosts all over the place. That's where they sent people to be executed.
I'm trying to look now because you mentioned the Spirit Temple. Like, what's the lore behind that? And I'm looking at the wiki page and it's like, well, I'll scroll down to the references because the Dark Horse book is what gave that lore on the Shadow Temple. And there is a reference from the Dark Horse Encyclopedia. Oh, what did they cite that for? The Spirit Temple is a dungeon in the Ocarina of Time. Citation. Next paragraph.
So no, it doesn't have any. Cause all of the other temples just seem to be, yeah, they're there. And that's where the sages live.
At least, like, Dodongo's Cavern has a pretty clear in-story justification of, like, that's where the Gorons get their food, because they eat rocks.
Those three, yes. The Deku Tree obviously has, lore behind it. Dodongo's Cavern has lore behind it. Jabu Jabu has lore behind him. But I'm talking, like, the temples specifically. They are all, like, I think the Fire Temple sort of has it as it's where Volvagia is sealed specifically, but that's about the closest you get.
And the manga, actually, which is not canon, expands upon Volvagia in a weird way, where Volvagia, how is it pronounced?
I've always said Volvagia.
Volvagia. In the manga, Volvagia is actually it's a pet dragon that Link had as a kid that was corrupted by Ganon.
What?
Yeah.
That's stupid.
I remember liking it, but it's also, like, completely not canon compliant. But actually, Volvagia is a returning boss fight from Zelda 2. It was the boss of the Three-Eye Rock Palace in Zelda 2, although in that game it was translated into English as Barba, but if you look at the Japanese name, it's identical.
Oh, right. My other note on the Shadow Temple. This is very important. It does have aesthetically my favorite boss in the game. While Bongo Bongo is a piss easy boss, like, wow, he's one of the easiest bosses in the game. At least in my experience, he was. I think aesthetically, fighting on a giant bongo drum and the fact that he is like beating the drum while you are fighting him is really cool. And I really, really like that boss. And I remember historically, Soul doesn't.
No, yeah, the first time I played the game and multiple times afterwards, that would be the boss I was least looking forward to because I just would struggle so much with it. And I'm not entirely sure what was wrong because I played on 3DS, so I had the motion controls for the bow, and it should have been really easy, but I would struggle with that fight a lot. And I'm not sure if it's an in-game hint or someone told me that, like, oh, you're supposed to use the hover boots to try to, like, stabilize yourself when you're in the air. And I think that made it worse for me.
No, I don't agree with that at all, because if you're in the air, then as soon as the hover boots turn off, you go into the falling animation and get pulled out of the bow.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I tried that strategy for a while, but I did, and it sort of helped, but not really. And then, for some reason, playing it for Smashterpieces, I went through that boss so quickly. It was the easiest I've ever been able to finish that fight, and it was a weird feeling, but I still don't really like the gameplay of it.
Well, you know, there is a trick to Bongo Bongo. I learned this very, very recently. I forget who told it to me. There is actually another item that you can use against Bongo Bongo. The ice arrows.
All right. I remember, I think DVD Smith told you this in your chat,
yes,
in your stream.
That makes sense.
They can get the only use for the ice arrows in the entire fucking game.
Yeah, so all you have to do is go to Gerudo Valley first and get the ice arrows.
But you can only get the ice arrows if you know the training grounds and do the shortest route possible, because if you don't do the shortest route possible, then you need the silver gauntlets.
So get good.
I guess, yeah.
Or go into the Shadow Temple, get the hover boots, leave, go do the Spirit Temple, get the ice arrows, and come back.
I had a very similar experience, actually, as the one you had with Bongo Bongo, but mine was with Shadow Link. Because when I first played the game, I remember Shadow Link being a boss that killed me upwards of like 10 times.
I think Shadow Link is definitely the hardest fight in the game.
I could not beat him, and then when I played it this time, first try, didn't hit me once.
The thing about Shadow Link is that he is similar to Girahim in Skyward Sword, where it's a boss fight that is intended to make you play differently. If you're just sort of mindlessly attacking it, then it's going to ruin your day. But if you do particular unusual strategies so that the boss is unable to predict you, then you can just breeze through it.
Yeah, it was possibly one of the easiest fights I had the whole game. It was crazy how easy it was, and I was really not looking forward to fighting him because I remember him being insanely hard, and he just wasn't.
I don't think I've ever had trouble with Dark Link. Like, I think maybe the very first time I played the game and realized, like, oh, he mirrors your attacks and blocks them, I was kind of confused on, like, well, how do I get through this? But I do not recall having trouble with that fight in terms of taking damage or dealing it.
I don't know. I still kind of dread him every time I have to play. He's still tough for me unless I'm, like, expressly using weird stuff. Like, if I happen to have the Bigoron sword by then and just, like, hit him with crouch stabs.
Does the game explain why Dark Link appears in that temple? Because it doesn't really make sense.
No, I think it's just a callback to Zelda 2 because it's not the first fight in the game to also be in Zelda 2.
Yeah, probably. And Miyamoto likes Zelda 2. Isn't it like historically Miyamoto was kind of miffed that Zelda 2 was so disliked?
I don't know. But actually, the way that the wiki explains it is that Dark Link materializes from Link's reflection in the water.
I mean, I guess that does... Hey, you'd think that would fit better in the Shadow Temple, though. Or the Spirit Temple, even.
But it's a reflection.
Yeah, and you get a mirror shield in the Spirit... in the Spirit Temple. You get a shield whose entire use is reflecting shit.
I think that it would have been an interesting concept had Dark Link been a reoccurring theme throughout the game, but I personally could not tell you how to make that fight interesting and different to happen multiple times. So it's probably good that they didn't.
Yeah, I could tell you exactly what it's Girahim. I think the comparison to Girahim is very apt.
So I've got some good news for you about the Ocarina of Time manga.
I've read the manga, and I like what the manga does with that story a lot. I don't think what the manga does with the story is good for a game, so it's good that
I agree.
It's good that it's a manga.
So,
Matt, what is your favorite dungeon?
Spirit Temple. I think it's so cool how you visit it as a child first, and you visit the mirror side of it as an adult. You revisit that central room as both adult Link and child Link, and it's sort of like everything you do as an adult in that dungeon is an echo of the child side of it because it's a symmetrical dungeon. And I think that's really cool, like the theme of that. And Master Quest does some really screwy stuff with that, by the way, because in Master Quest, you do a puzzle on the adult side, and then that drops a chest in the child side that you have to go back to being child Link to get, which I don't know how that works in the timeline, but whatever. Jabba Jabbu's got cows in him that act as switches. So Spirit Temple is just really cool for me. The aesthetic is really awesome. Being sort of being the whole desert theme and everything. Conceptually, Twinrova is the coolest idea for a fight, even though I kind of hate that boss.
Yeah, I think Twinrova is my least favorite boss I think Morpha is my least favorite boss in Ocarina of Time.
I just find Morpha kind of boring.
Morpha sucks.
Both of those bosses have the same issue of you kind of have to wait around until the boss does the thing.
And I think Morpha has the extra added layer of kind of being a little bit frustrating when it's like, I hit it with the fucking, why didn't it come out? Because it's not hard. It's just like, why didn't it do the thing? Man, fuck this. That's the experience I had anyways. But yeah, I think that Twinrova it's too much waiting. It's so much waiting for them to do the thing that you need to do, and it's not hard to dodge their attacks. And it's too reliant on their random movements. I don't know. It's not a great boss, I don't think. I agree that I think the concept is cool, and I think a later Zelda boss did that same concept.
I really like dungeons where you revisit the same areas in different contexts. So, and that's also why I like the Water Temple so much, because you revisit that center room in very different contexts based on the water level. It's just something that I find really cool, recontextualizing stuff that you've already seen. And I feel like for the most part, the dungeons in this game don't really do that, which is why Spirit Temple and Water Temple stand out to me so much. Dodongo's Cavern kind of does this too, but to a lesser extent, where you come back to the higher part of the center room to bomb the statue's eyes. No, actually, Dodongo's Cavern is pretty good with this too, all things considered. And you also revisit the Lizalfos room. You know what? Dodongo's Cavern's pretty damn good. And that's easily the best child dungeon.
I think my favorite dungeon, weirdly enough, because I remember it being one of my least favorite dungeons, is probably the Forest Temple. Mostly for its, like, atmosphere, because you guys know me. I like some good creepy atmosphere, and the Forest Temple feels really fucking creepy.
I think Forest Temple definitely has the best dungeon music in the game.
I would agree with that, which I think is actually a good segue into, unless you guys have anything else that you want to talk about. I think we should go music. We'll hit on the other thing we did, and then we'll probably be good to call it good for Ocarina, doing a little bit.
You don't want to talk about the game's gripping narrative?
You are Link. You have Ganondorf go, and then Zelda disappear, and then get stuff.
Well, the game is the centerpiece for one of the biggest debates in the Zelda fandom ever, which is the timeline.
Sure is.
That sounds like you don't want to talk about that.
Fuck, I've heard so much talk about the goddamn Zelda timeline in my life, about something Nintendo clearly doesn't actually care about.
They care about it.
That doesn't invalidate it. I genuinely don't think they do, because I think in Nintendo's mind, it's not so much that, like, oh, the timeline's stupid. I think they don't keep to the timeline because it is stifling. If they have to fit everything in this sequence of events, no matter how vast it is, because these games are separated by hundreds, if not thousands of years, if they have to keep slotting stuff into that, it just becomes too much, I feel like. That's generally how I feel about the timeline.
And Nintendo said as much too. They've been very clear about the fact that they designed the game first. The story comes second. And that leads to the timeline just being an afterthought. It's wherever things fit. And Breath of the Wild, to this day, they don't care enough to give it a real placement. There's the split timeline. Because with the adult timeline and the child timeline set up by this game, there's two alternate timelines that all the games fall into. When asked about Breath of the Wild, Aonuma just said, it's in both. Whatever.
It sure is a thing.
But I think that aesthetically, Ocarina of Time is pretty good. Its story is bare bones, but the way that it is told is pretty cool for being one of the first 3D story adventure games.
But I also think it suffers from, again, it's like, and I knew that this was the case, but I didn't realize how heavily this was the case until I played both games. It's just Link to the Past.
Yeah, which, again, a little less impressive to me nowadays, but the way that it is presented, aesthetically is a huge deal. A lot of the cutscenes are way better, because the whole thing with going into the future after an encounter with Ganondorf is just going into the Dark World after you fight Aghanim.
Yeah.
But because of the way that Ganondorf is presented as the overarching villain of the remainder of the game, after, like, this cool cutscene where he just completely wrecks you, I think that's better than you fight Aghanim, and then a text box appears, and then now you're in the Dark World. Even though it is fundamentally the exact same story as in Link to the Past, I like it a lot more here because they have the freedom to show it instead of just having it be text boxes. And I think that that's a big part of why this game is so much more memorable than Link to the Past, because in addition to breaking that 3D barrier for gameplay, it breaks that 3D barrier for story so that we can really get more invested in what's happening.
And also, in Ocarina of Time, they give you the light arrows in a cutscene instead of you having to go find a hidden cave to get the arrows that you need to hit Ganon.
That's helpful. I like that better. As opposed to Link to the Past, which doesn't tell you where to find them at all.
It just says, find them. It didn't even say that. It doesn't even say you need them. But you do.
Something else that I really like about Ocarina of Time that I know you have issues with its consistency of how well it works, but Z-targeting was kind of incredible. as a way to bring that 3D combat into play, which a lot of games still use some form or facsimile of Z-targeting to this day.
And yes, so I put Z-targeting in the same spot as I put the camera controls in Mario 64. They're revolutionary for their time. They laid the groundwork for 3D cameras that we know today, and in Zelda's case, lock-on features, which are in every fucking action game, and if they're not, it's a bad action game. Like you can see it in Dark Souls, Kingdom Hearts. It's in Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's everywhere now. Every action game has a lock-on feature that pretty much owes its existence to Z-targeting. My problem with Z-targeting is that, hey, Navi, that keys is literally in the camera. Please just Z-target. Target it? Oh my fucking god, I'm looking at it. I'm staring at it.
And weirdly, Z-targeting has the exact same problem of why it's bad that Super Mario 64's camera does. They tied it to a character in the world.
And she can't get close because of the dark energy.
Okay, well, that part's just dumb.
Going back a little bit to what you mentioned about the light arrows and how Ocarina of Time gives you them because they're vital in defeating Ganon, whereas in Link to the Past you have to find them, and if you don't, then you're at an impasse when you try. I find that the difficulty level and like the entry point of Ocarina of Time into games and the Zelda series is very well balanced, because it's forgiving enough where if you are struggling, like there's Navi, there's Gossip Stones, there's plenty of things in the game to kind of guide your way and tell you. And some of the things that happen in the game are just told to you by the story instead of you actively having to search them out. Which I like, because I find that when I go and play older games, I find those to be much more difficult because they don't really tell you a lot about what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to do it, because the assumption, I guess, is that you've played other games like that and you should know. But because Ocarina of Time is like one of the first kind of, 3D games of Zelda and of kind of Nintendo systems, they had to put in a lot of tutorials of like, well, this is how you move your sword diagonally, or do this or do that. And so I really like that aspect about the game.
So you're half right. You're half right in that, yes, those are there because it's a 3D game, but here's the thing. Older games didn't tell you where you're supposed to go, not because they expected you to have played games like that before. They just expected you to buy a guide or figure it out.
Well, it's not so much that as they came with an instruction booklet.
Also,
which
yeah, that too.
Ocarina of Time also did. There, like, I just sent it to you. Take a look at it. That's it. It's kind of insane to look at this nowadays, in that this is effectively a miniature strategy guide. It has every single item listed.
So many trees died to tell you how to play Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, it highlights every single thing on the screen. It even has spoilers. It tells you that you're going to become Adult Link. It shows you the destroyed Hyrule Castle town because 7 years have passed.
Does it tell you who Sheik is?
I don't think it does.
Oh, right. We didn't even talk about that. Man, Sheik is Zelda, guys. Holy shit.
Oh yeah, we should probably talk about the character that we're playing this game for at all.
I never would have guessed. One of the most famous twists of video games, and the thing that is the main reason why everybody knows it, regardless of whether they've played the game or not, if they have any knowledge of video games, is because of Super Smash Brothers.
Starting a long line of Smash Brothers not caring about spoilers, which continues to this day.
Sure does. I don't think there's anything else to say about that except Sheik is Zelda. I think that twist is handled very well, for the most part, because I doubt anybody would have been able to guess back in the day. It's kind of like, it's up there with Aerith Dies in terms of like big video game historical moments, is finding out that Sheik has been Zelda this whole fucking time. And it also started a tradition of, like, Tetra is very obviously supposed to be a Sheik analog, but for Wind Waker. Pirate instead of Ninja, etc., etc.
And then it took a while before we just kind of accepted, hey, Zelda can be cool. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because this game kind of has the same issue as Wind Waker, though to a much lesser degree. Where Sheik reveals she's Zelda, instantly helpless.
Yep.
Instantly helpless.
It's a lot better in this game because the story plays into it of Ganondorf was never at any disadvantage. He says as much in dialogue. He was explicitly letting Link and Sheik just go and do whatever they were doing because he knew that eventually Zelda would show herself. He was watching and waiting, and boom, as soon as she shows up, he's ready. And obviously we'll talk about this more when we actually play Wind Waker, but in Wind Waker, Tetra learns that she's Princess Zelda, and then she just sits in a basement for the rest of the game.
She goes to sleep and then wakes up at the end.
No, she sits in a basement and waits for you first.
It's kind of ridiculous. But yeah, so that's that. That's where that comes from. It's a very interesting and historically significant moment in video games. I want to talk about music. So, music in this game, a lot of very famous, much like Link to the Past.
I'm gonna take this opportunity right now, by the way, because I re-listened to the Link to the Past episode a couple days ago, and boy, howdy, what were we doing? Where we were like, oh yeah, sure, this game introduced, like, you know, Kakariko Village, the Hyrule Castle theme, the Great Fairy theme, but man, the soundtrack's weak, huh?
It is kind of. Have you heard the shop theme in Link to the Past? It's awful.
So I would just like to take a moment and say, boy, we whiffed on that one.
I disagree. Whatever. I think that my favorite song in this game, we mentioned it earlier, but I do actually think one of my favorite pieces in the game is the Forest Temple. It just has this really, really nice atmosphere to it, and there's not a lot to it, and it's very repetitive. But like, it just feels mysterious and kind of creepy, and I really, really like it.
We're starting to get into the earliest point in video game history where music stopped being exclusively melodic songs and started being environmental songs. And the Forest Temple theme feels like a really good transition point there. Where it feels like atmospheric sounds while also still having a clear through line of like its musical identity. It doesn't have a strong melody, but it still is recognizably music. And it starts introducing that idea of atmospheric soundscapes. And I think that's a really cool thing to like zero in on and identify.
I can agree with that. I really like the Forest Temple music because, like you said, it's atmospheric, but I don't get the feeling that like anything in the environment is making that sound. Whereas I find with some of the other dungeons that also have atmospheric music, it's almost like they're trying to mimic sounds that would be happening in the dungeon, like creaking and kind of echoey vibes. And I don't necessarily like that in a music track.
The reason it works for me is that there's kind of like the feeling of like sort of twisted woodland sounds in the sounds that are in the Forest Temple theme. And that really fits the idea of the Forest Temple for me. It is this twisted version of a woodland soundscape. That feels really good for me, and it hits the right tone in a way that I feel like some of the other dungeon music struggle with a little bit.
One of the tracks in this game that really impacted me the first time I played it was the Hyrule Field overworld theme. You know, you just finished this fight within the Deku Tree, and you're leaving the forest for the first time, and the song starts in a very kind of, I don't know what the word is, but you're presented with Hyrule Field, and your possibilities seem endless at that point. And the theming of that song is very similar to the feeling of exploring for the first time as Link. And it is a theme that is used throughout a lot of the other Zelda games, but there's something about the instrumentation of the Ocarina of Time one that is always probably going to be my favorite.
Well, the Hyrule Field theme in Ocarina of Time is actually kind of notable for being one of the first overworld themes in Zelda that was not in any way a riff off of the main Zelda theme.
In fact, this is one of the only games in the series where the main Zelda theme is basically not present.
Yeah, I actually cannot think of a single spot in the game where it plays.
Yeah, it's not on the soundtrack. That was actually, apparently, I was looking into it years ago. Apparently that was controversial back in the time.
Was there an internet for controversy to happen on?
It would have been early internet. Like, very early internet. It was 98. There was very primitive internet at that point.
I've always kind of liked the Ocarina of Time Hyrule Field theme, too. I don't think it's my favorite Hyrule Field theme, but I feel like it hits a certain note of, like, that whimsical adventure kind of feeling that a lot of the others don't, because Zelda has often pushed for, like, that epic adventure feeling. And I've never really felt like that's exactly the right tone for the series. I feel like this tone fits a little better.
Yeah, and it's a song that I don't really get tired of listening to. Like before you get the Sun song, and you kind of just have to stand around if you're waiting for it to be night or day. I don't get tired of listening to it, and I find with a lot of other games, if there's a song that plays in a common area that you're in a lot, it's very easy to get tired of it and never want to listen to it again. But I don't get that with Hyrule Field.
I get that with a lot of, like, random battle songs in RPGs, so I get what you're saying.
For me, I think my favorite track in the game is the horse race.
Yeah, I was hoping somebody would bring this up. This song rules.
This song's so good.
I think we mentioned Tom Breyer way back in the day on the Mario World episode.
Yep.
Tom Breyer actually did a version of this song.
He did.
And it's great.
Honestly, I feel like it hits the high energy tone better than like most anything in the franchise. And it is just a total blast to listen to. And it's just like, it's I don't even know if the loop's a full minute, but it still manages to be something that I will never get tired of listening to.
I don't think it is a full minute. I think it's like 45 seconds long. It is fantastic. I love this song so much.
It's a great song, but I get a little soured on it, remembering struggling to beat the second race.
See, that's another thing I had zero issue with this time that I remember having a bit of trouble with my first time.
I've definitely gotten better at it, but when I first played the game, it was infuriating because I would get caught on corners or I would use up the carrots too fast, and then you're kind of just fucked after that.
You kind of have to really know what you're doing.
It's better than Chocobo racing, I'll give it that.
Well, yeah.
For me, the next song that I want to talk about, because I think it is one of the catchiest songs in the game, is the shop theme. I love the shop theme in this game. It is so catchy and fun and just a good time had by all.
I feel like I identify this song with shops in the Zelda franchise more than any other shop theme.
I think it's one of the best shop themes, not just in the franchise, but like in video games.
I can see that, yeah. I mean, if you put in shop theme on YouTube, it might just be because of the algorithm targeting me specifically, but shop theme 10 hours Ocarina of Time is the first result.
It's a really fucking good shop theme. I think they've tried to recapture the same feeling in other shop themes in the franchise, like when they're not just straight up using this theme for their shops, which a lot of Zelda games do. I think the closest they've come is the Mallow Mart theme.
Mallow Mart's a totally different energy.
But I feel like they were going for this energy and they missed the mark.
I don't think I've ever heard the full shop theme, because in base Ocarina of Time games, I go to the Kokiri shop. I don't really go to any of the other shops and buy things ever.
Well, now might be a good time to mention, hey, rupees are worthless.
Oh yeah, rupees suck. In this game especially. Worse than any of the others that I've played.
I feel like once I bought that Deku Shield at the beginning of the game, I never went into a shop again.
Hylian Shield. You need to buy the Hylian Shield.
No, you don't.
That's the last that you don't? Who gives you a Hylian Shield?
You get it in the shield grave in the graveyard.
I don't know what that means. I bought a Hylian Shield.
Also, I think you can get one from a chest too, somewhere.
Huh.
It's a little bit later in the game, but I don't think you need to buy a Hylian Shield.
So, like, them selling the tunics and stuff is very obviously supposed to be, likes can take your stuff. You need to be able to get it back.
But if you defeat the like fast enough, you just get the tunic back.
Yeah, but what if you don't defeat it fast enough? Because likes suck.
I don't know. 300 rupees so that I don't have to go grab an extra blue fire to unfreeze the King Zora. Almost worth it. Never mind the fact that I have to spend that same blue fire on the shop to buy the tunic in the first place.
Speaking of, by the way, the blue fire, speaking of, hey, Zelda?
Ice Cavern sucks.
Hey, Zelda, coming close, Zelda franchise. Stop making dungeons where I have to empty my bottles to get through them.
Also, as you famously said on our Link to the Past episode, I get it. Ice go slip.
That doesn't mean it's good. Same with the hover boots. Hover boots go slip. That don't mean they're good.
Why do the hover boots go slip?
It's a good question.
'Cause you're light on your feet.
Actually, that's probably the exact logic.
No, I think the logic is that, well, they had to make it so they had to give you some reason to not wear the hover boots all the time.
I guess. So yeah, it's just a good shop theme. It's a good shop theme. Anyways. So what, you got any other music?
I really like the Castletown music. It never fails to cheer me up. It's just, I think it has some of that whimsical energy that some of the other songs we've talked about has, which plays well into the game, but it's such a joyful time, and you're like, look at this peaceful town, nothing could ever go wrong here, right?
Oh no. Yeah, I agree. It's a fun song. It is one of those that like really stuck out to me the first time I played. It's just a good, fun, nice. It sounds like a Renaissance festival though, let's be real.
I mean, that's what Hyrule Castletown is.
So this is a bit of spoilers. The past two songs showed up in very funny contexts in my randomizer, where the boss theme for Goma and Phantom Ganon was the shop theme, which was, first of all, fucking hilarious.
Sick.
It made those bosses the funniest experience I've ever had in a Zelda game. But at one point, some Lizalfos fell down into the ground, or into the arena, and the Hyrule Castletown theme started playing, and it felt like I was LARPing. Like, the game was now about a kid LARPing and his friends pretending to be lizard people. It was hilarious.
I'm trying to think if the market theme is the best Hyrule Castletown theme that we've had. And thinking on it, I actually can't think of another. I know there was one in Twilight Princess, but I don't remember it at all.
Yeah, I can't think of what it sounds like in Twilight Princess, and that's the only other game I think where you enter a Hyrule Castle town. Because otherwise, I'd say stuff like Skyloft counts, and Skyloft is great. Or like Outset Island is also really good.
Oh, I'm listening to Twilight Princess's Hyrule Castletown music right now, and it's just Market 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Oh, nice. Well, there you go. Do you got a second song?
I'm gonna give it to, not because I think that this song is like particularly great, but I think it is particularly interesting, for the Fire Temple theme. Because it was changed it was changed after version 1.0. Because the original version, on the 1.0 cartridge, had an Islamic chant in it.
I believe it was not actually an Islamic chant, but it sounded close enough to one that the response was warranted, that some Islamic groups were like, hey, that's not cool, because, like, Islam has very strict rules about use of its stuff in entertainment, and that strict rule is basically don't.
Yeah.
And so they went to Nintendo and were like, hey, that's not cool, please don't. And Nintendo was like, shit, alright, yeah, cool, we will replace the music, and so it did get replaced.
Oh, so actually what I've found is, according to ZeldaDungeon.net, posted on May 31st, 2012 by one Gestalt Replicant. I didn't have to actually say that name there, but I figure you understand why it's important to me.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that this happened, so there was no outcry. Nintendo realized themselves that it was in fact an Islamic prayer chant that they got from an open sound library as opposed from being made in-house. And after the 1.0 cartridge was released, they realized it, and they took it upon themselves to remove it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, there are so many. Remember that time that Little Big Planet put like a reading of the Quran in a song, and then we're like, shit, we have to recall all the games so we can replace it.
I actually don't.
Yeah, that happened. Like, this is a weird thing that happens in video games a lot, because I guess, like, royalty-free or, like, sound libraries must include Islamic stuff in there all the time. And again, like, they have very strict rules about using their stuff in entertainment, and that rule is, don't.
Which, fair.
Yeah, fair. Like, that's fine.
It's one thing if you're making, like, an artistic statement or some meaningful piece of art about Islamic culture. But if you're just gonna put it in because it sounds cool, maybe don't.
Yeah. I got 2 songs that I think should end this out, because I think they're 2 of the most famous songs in the game. The first, of course, is Gerudo Valley. It's a famous song. You've probably heard this song in some form. It's super, 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 super good. And I think every remix of it, I think the remix of it in Smash is fantastic. There was that CD that came with Skyward Sword that has a really, really cool orchestration of Gerudo Valley. It's just one of the cooler songs in the game.
There was another piece of music in the game that I wanted to talk about just because of its, like, notability.
Oh, go for it.
It's the Ganondorf battle theme. And the reason for this is because of the funky time signature that song has. There's a YouTube channel titled 8-Bit Music Theory that does a very in-depth look at various video game songs from an educated musical theory standpoint. And I'm actually going to look up this video so I get the correct time signature. And they have a video about odd time signatures in video games. And the Ganondorf battle theme has a time signature of 23/16.
Jesus Christ. That's nuts.
And it leads to a song that you just can't find your footing in. Like, try to find the beat in that song. It's so difficult because 23/16, what the hell is that?
It's not real.
No, it's not.
That actually leads quite well into mine. The other one that I was going to bring up, which is the Ganon battle. I don't know. I just think it's neat. I just think it's a neat song that is very, very final.
The Ganon battle is actually like kind of incredible from all points. I talked about it when I was streaming it. It's got just such this incredible feel of an epic finale. And it's also like you spend this entire game with Ganondorf. And at the time, it's like, well, who the hell's Ganondorf? What happened to Ganon, the monster? And at the end of the game, when Ganondorf has supposedly been defeated, he like literally rises out of the ashes, and with the Triforce of Power, becomes the Beast Ganon. And it's probably the coolest thing that the series had done up to that point.
And also the lighting in that fight is very good.
Yeah.
It is lit in a way that you can basically only see his eyes almost, and the rest of him is kind of shrouded in shadow. It's very cool. It's a very aesthetically cool boss fight, and the music is pretty good. Alright, we got one last thing to talk about before we're ready to wrap this up. We did a randomizer.
An Ocarina of Time multi-world randomizer.
I promised I would do a randomizer in some form, and I did.
I learned the hard way that multi-world is not a good one-sitting thing, but...
It sure isn't. I am still tired.
So the Ocarina of Time randomizer, what it is it takes every item that you can get in the game. Not just the real items, but also junk items like rupees in chests, pieces of heart, which aren't junk, but they're whatever. Upgrades, all that stuff. And it shuffles them. It completely moves them around everywhere. With the only caveat being a logic system that makes sure that the game can still be completed. And that's about all that it makes sure of, unless you manually tell it to make sure of other things. So you're dropped in, and the game becomes a big puzzle of like, where is everything? What is the path to getting everything that I need to beat Ganon? And like, where have I been? Where have I not been? Keeping track of all of that. And I love randomizers because they have effectively made Ocarina of Time an infinite game. I have reached the point where a regular playthrough of Ocarina of Time is just going through the motions. It's just paint by numbers. I know the game too well and just can't really meaningfully play it again. So a randomizer gives me a meaningful goal to figure out as I go in this game that I am so intimately familiar with. And I am a huge, huge, huge fan of it. And the one that we did specifically was a multi-world randomizer, where you have multiple people with emulators hooked up over fancy networking stuff, and it shuffles your items not only into your own world, but also your friends' worlds as well. So I can open up a chest, and in it is Joe's hookshot, and he gets the hookshot.
It sure was a thing. I enjoyed it. I don't think I would ever play it again in that context. I think if I ever do another randomizer, it's going to be not on a stream and not in a full 6.5 hour session.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause fuck, I'm tired. But overall, it was a fun time. I think it had some real funny moments, like me walking up to a fucking gossip stone and it telling me, "Oh, I heard that Joe's bad at Zelda," which was transcendent. I've never had the game tell me I'm bad at it before. Usually that's my job. And also me buying Soul's Zora tunic for her 30 seconds after she'd already spent 300 rupees on a Zora tunic.
It was a very heartbreaking moment.
It was so good. It was so good.
But as Joe alluded to earlier, not only does it shuffle around all of your items, but like all of the songs and sound effects are shuffled around. Your tunic color, your health color, those all can be totally random as well. And I really like the sound effect shuffling of it, because you get fun things like Epona, instead of neighing like a normal horse would, it makes the little mweep sound that King Zora does when he has to shuffle to the side.
It's awesome. I enjoyed the sound effect shuffling because it made, when Navi said hey, instead of saying hey, it was just boop, Like a very subtle, quiet beep. And whenever she Z-targeted on something, it was Zelda going, huh?
For me, Navi saying hey became the Gold Skulltula shuffling sound, which threw me for a loop.
Yeah, that sounds frustrating.
I would encourage you, Joe, to give a try to a randomizer where you are not streaming and committing to doing the entire thing in one sitting. Me, Soul, and our friend Pat have been slowly working through one together, which over the course of around 4 sittings, I think now, we have put maybe 15 hours into it.
Yeah. We're like, oh, let's just pick it up for an hour or two, and then it's 4 a.m.
I find randomizers to be very addicting. I love them. And we're very close to that one that we're doing with Pat. I'm in Ganon's Tower. I just need magic.
I am very willing to do another one. It's just, it needs to be under a different context.
Yeah, so a regular randomizer, if you're good at it, is 6 hours from start to finish. And a multi-world, which I had not really recognized this because this was the second time I had ever done multi-world. Because obviously you gotta get other people to do it with you. A multi-world randomizer, I learned, can take considerably longer. Especially if you're 12 hours in and you realize that you forgot to get someone's bombs in the Deku tree.
Yeah, that was my bad. I missed one chest in the Deku tree, and that screwed another player for most of the game, which in then turn will screw future players because all of your items are connected, and if one thing blocks someone from getting into like an entire temple or just doing certain checks, then that's going to block them from finding an item for another player, and it's a total chain effect.
Ocarina of Time randomizers are super cool, and I love them, and everyone should give them a try.
Anyways, I think it's about time to call it. We've been talking for a while. Do we have any final thoughts?
Ocarina of Time's cool. I like it. I think that it's still super fun to play to this day. Obviously, I think the core mechanics are like really, really solid. Because, I mean, when you play a randomizer, you engage with the core mechanics extensively. I think that they made the jump to 3D about as perfectly as any video game could. And it is not perfect to this day. Like we talked about, the Z targeting is a little finicky, but it holds up shockingly well for how much it pioneered the idea of 3D gaming, effectively a second time after Mario 64 did it already. And I was saying for a long time, you touch up the graphics and it could be a game released today. And that's exactly what they did with the 3DS version. And I think it worked. And it's great. And I love it.
It is a very good game. I had a very good time with it. I still don't think it's even close to being my favorite Zelda. I think Majora and Wind Waker still beat it out quite handily. But it's good. It's a good time.
Yeah, for me, having it be my first game ever, there's definitely a big nostalgia bias on why it's still my favorite Zelda. But I think it's just a great balance of, being forgiving but still challenging. And with things like Master Quest and randomizers, there's still ways to make it like even more challenging and exciting. So
yeah, that pretty much does it for Ocarina of Time, I think. We are now leaving 1998. Bye, 1998.
We are leaving a pre-Smash Brothers era.
This is true. We are finally in a world where Smash exists. But before we get into that, Soul, thank you for being on the show. Is there anything at all that you want to plug?
There's nothing going on these days.
Well, that's good to hear, maybe, I think. Is it? I don't know.
What's your favorite TV show right now?
I don't watch TV. I'm a boring person.
Well, thank you for being on the show. It was fun to have you on. I'm glad we could finally get you in. Thank you for designing our logo. I know did I pay you for that? Don't answer that on air.
That sounds like a no.
I'm exposing you. You're one of those for exposure people. I
have paid you for so much shit since then. But yeah, it's a good logo. I'm very, very happy with it. And I'm glad we could finally get you on the show. You were like you were the no-brainer guest for this game. So I'm happy you agreed to be on.
Yeah, it was fun, and I'm glad I got to revisit the game again in so many different ways.
But unfortunately now we must kick you into the well that I kicked Miles into a couple months ago, I guess.
Oh, hold on. No, there was a tradition that we forgot to do when Miles was on. Soul, is there any member of Nintendo of America that you want to fight?
Oh yeah, this is true. Do you want to fight any member of Nintendo of America? Let's just say Nintendo in general. You want to fight anybody from Nintendo?
I really want to fight Bill Trinan.
Okay.
Any particular reason?
Does she need one?
I'd have a decent chance of winning.
Why do
Is
you,
that the only
why
reason?
do you think this?
The only reason why I think this is because when Tomodachi Life came out, I had a Bill Trinan me.
Oh my god.
And he and I were like best friends until we got into a fight, and my me won that fight. That's the only logic I have.
Flawless. Well, I gotta throw you into the well and seal it up so we can get into our next game. But again, thank you for being on. Bye, Soul. Anyways, it's time to talk about our next game. And that game, as you mentioned before, we have entered a very, very interesting and big part of the history that we're following. Yeah, that rolled right off the tongue.
Say interesting as though it's something unusual and not the reason for the season.
We are going to be doing a special episode. This is not a numbered one. It's just a special one of the 1999 Nintendo 64 game, Super Smash Bros. We're officially in a period where the game series that is the reason we're doing this show exists.
Only took us 2 years.
Only took us 2 years.
So we both played this game growing up, right?
Yes, was my first Smash game. I played the hell out of this game as a kid.
Oh god, I can barely remember actually playing it as a kid, even though I know that I did. I remember Melee a lot more than this one, because I was only like 8 years old when Melee came out, so Smash 64 was definitely an early time for me.
I played Smash 64 all the time in elementary school. It is still, I think, my second favorite game of the series. Ultimate is what finally dethroned it. As a kid, I was not super great at it. I never unlocked Ness. I did not unlock Ness until I was an adult.
I think I still haven't unlocked Ness.
Unlocking Captain Falcon was also super hard for me.
What was Captain Falcon's unlock?
You have to beat Classic at a certain, like, within a certain time frame.
Oh, yeah.
It's Luigi, I believe, is attached to board the platforms. Jigglypuff is just complete Classic, which was a traditional Jigglypuff unlock method for a long while until Ultimate, I think.
No, it wasn't.
Wasn't it? Was it?
It was just the original in Melee.
Really? I could have sworn it was that in Brawl.
Jigglypuff was one of the last characters you got in Brawl.
Oh, God. That's dumb. What an unfortunate spot for Jigglypuff.
And then did Smash 4 even bother with unlocking Jigglypuff?
I don't remember.
Doesn't matter, it's Jigglypuff.
Yeah, it's Jigglypuff. We'll talk about Jigglypuff when we get to the Jigglypuff game, which is months, if not over a year away. So, I played a bunch of it. Captain Falcon is getting through Classic within a certain time frame. I think it's 7 minutes.
It's quick.
And then Ness is completing Classic on medium difficulty without any game overs.
Which would later become the Crazy Hand conditions.
Yeah, unlocking Ness for me as a kid was so hard.
Yeah, kids don't know how to play video games.
I could unlock everybody else, but Ness was a problem. So, I don't know how this is going to go. We are basically just going to be playing some exhibition matches. Maybe run through Classic a couple of times, do some board the platforms, break the targets.
Maybe we'll just unlock all the characters right there on stream.
Maybe. Who knows? That would be weird.
That's 2 runs of Classic each.
There's only 4 of them. So,
It's like the only game that it's viable for.
yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, we'll figure that out. And it's going to be a good time. And the VOD will be on the YouTube channel if you would like to watch it.
There's not too much to say that doesn't just creep into, like, doing a Smash 64 episode.
Yeah, so we will get to that. It'll be the special, and then we will move on to the next number game on the list, which is Pokemon Snap. So, hope you're... Our first Pokemon game. We're going from our first Smash game to our first Pokemon game.
Barely missed it.
What an interesting sort of... And Pokemon and F-Zero, I believe, are the only series that are in the original 64 that we have not touched yet.
I think so.
Because F-Zero we won't hit for a good long while, and Pokemon is literally the next game. With that, you can follow us on Twitter, and on Facebook, and on YouTube at Smashterpieces. You can find our editor, Peter Spezia, at Pete Speakeasy on Twitter. Go and give him a follow. You can find me on Twitter at TheDebuggy. You can find Matt on Twitter at GrimaceDoMenace. You can find my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/DetectivDobaga and Matt's at twitch.tv/GrimaceTheMenace. When you can find most of our streams, honestly, be it Smashterpieces or otherwise, on twitch.tv/Nintendo World Report, because Smashterpieces is brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Nintendo World Report. And with that, my name is Joe.
And my name is Matt.
We will see you next time for our discussion on Super Smash Brothers!